Thanks, sorry. It's 6:38. Early polls following the second TV debate between Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage suggest that the UKIP leader won, and by a bigger margin than last week.
The exchange between the two men over whether the UK should remain in the EU was ill-tempered at times, with disagreements over Syria and immigration.
We'll discuss it in more detail in a moment. First, though, let's listen to some of their key arguments from last night.
It's a picture of a very unhappy-looking Native American. It says, he used to ignore immigration, now he lives on a reservation. The suggestion being that if we ignore immigration, the British people will be cooped up on a reservation. Nigel Farage, we are not, by staying in the European Union, we are not going to be cooped up on a Native American reservation. What are you going to say next? That you're crazy horse or sitting bull? We've got to have a level-headed debate about these things.
You, as Deputy Prime Minister, were happy to go and bomb Libya. You did that, and 3.5 years on, the situation in Libya is worse than it was. So whichever way you look at it, we have got huge problems with a population over which we have no control at all. But it's left a white working class effectively as an underclass, and that, I think, is a disaster for our society.
Well, joining us now is Jane Green, who's a Professor of Political Science at the University of Manchester, and I guess you watched this in detail last night. Interesting to see that there was a poll just done right afterwards, YouGov Snap poll afterwards, giving the debate to Mr Farage by 68% to Clegg's 27%. What do you make of what you saw?
Well, I watched last night's debate and I watched last week's debate.
Yeah.
And last night's debate, you know, you could tell the gloves were off. I think that it was quite confusing for people. There was so much debate about whose facts were correct. And so they were disagreeing about that to a huge degree. So I think a lot of people would have come away feeling quite confused about who to believe. In terms of who won, I think it was actually quite likely that Nigel Farage was going to win, because our data from the British election study shows that public opinion is around 60% to the side of Euroscepticism, so the views that Nigel Farage is talking about, and only about 20% of people really agree with Nick on this particular issue. So it's not too surprising that people were going to agree with the kinds of things that Nigel Farage was saying.
You have a situation where Nick Clegg, as Deputy Prime Minister, as well, of course, as leader of his own party, did put himself up for this. In fact, it was very much his idea, wasn't it? Yeah. Did he have anything to gain from it? Because he stood there accused of willfully lying. Nigel Farage did that to quite a big round of applause. He's come out the loser in the polls, if you take those to be true. Yeah. Did he have anything to gain?
That's really interesting, because many people have been really quick to say, well, why did Nick Clegg do this? And it's true that any political leader doesn't really want that kind of label of being seen as the loser or being seen as weak in any way. However, if we think about it, Nick Clegg didn't really have too much to lose in terms of the electorate. His party isn't as popular as it used to be, and the issue of Europe, and particularly of closer integration with Europe, of staying in Europe, is one which his particular Liberal Democrat voters are more likely to agree with. So in that sense, for a party that needs to shore up its base support, if you like, perhaps I imagine that might have been what Nick Clegg was thinking going into those debates.
And Nick Clegg accused Nigel Farage, didn't he, of peddling dangerous fantasies as well. And there was this sort of swapping of facts and what may or may not be the facts. How does that leave the audience, do you think, then? And will they be looking then for more facts to see who was actually right?
I think it's like I said, it's so difficult. We're in an environment at the moment where the electorate looks to British parties and British politics and has huge mistrust of politics and politicians. And again, the British election study shows this over time. This is one of the things that's very important when we think about elections. So putting a debate in front of people where the trading of insults is probably the biggest story this morning, the morning after, I think that's unhelpful. And there was a lot of information in the debates. I think if people want to understand the issues better, there has never been such an occasion. It's unprecedented, and the level of detail was impressive, and both of those leaders have a very strong command of the issues. So there is a lot to learn.
Jane Green, very interesting talking to you. Thank you very much.